Okay.
Where and when were you born?
I was born here in Cincinnati in 1974, so now you can figure out how old I am. I lived here until we were 12, or until I was 12, and when I was 12, we moved overseas.
All right. What year did you immigrate from the U.S.?
It was 1987. It would have been August of 87 was when we finally got there.
All right. And then, what year did you immigrate from Venezuela back to the U.S.?
We came back in the spring of 1990.
All right. When did you arrive in Venezuela, and when did you arrive in America on the way home?
It was, let's see, it was August, and stupidly, it was a Sunday, because we had to start school the very next day, and that was awful. Getting to Venezuela and not having a clue what we were doing, not knowing anybody.
Yeah.
I met a girl in the elevator on the way down, and she happened to be a 7th grader, and
That's good.
and she and I ended up becoming friends because we were the only people we knew. And so then we lived there until we moved back at I guess it was the middle of June. We flew back into New York and then back home.
All right. How old were you each time you immigrated?
12 when we left, and then 15 when we got back.
All right. Describe Venezuela. What were your house, food, clothing, and life like there?
It was very cool. Our house, well, the first six weeks we were there, we had to stay in a hotel because our stuff hadn't gotten to from the United States to Venezuela yet. And so we stayed in an international hotel right in downtown Caracas, which was pretty cool to get to see everything. Then we went, our house was kind of in a suburb, but it was still within the city. I mean, Caracas is a huge city, like monster sized. And so we were on the east side of the city, but we were still close to downtown. 20 minutes away to be downtown, but we were still definitely in the city. And our house was very beautiful, absolutely beautiful. It was called Quinta Odessa. All of the houses in Venezuela have names.
Really? That's cool.
You don't have a house number, you have a name on your house.
That's actually really cool.
Yeah, so I lived on Calle Sombrero, and then I lived in Quinta Odessa, which means Odessa's house. Odessa was the woman who owned the house, and we rented it from her. And it had, now I grew up in Westchester, so it was a nice house. Nothing spectacular.
Yeah.
The house there, we had 9 bathrooms, marble floors, a guest house that was not attached to the main house. We had chauffeur's quarters and 2 maids' quarters. Totally different than here. There were porches outside of all of the bedrooms. So in the afternoon, I'd come home from school and I would sit on a big comfy chair out on the porch, and that's where I would do my homework.
I love that.
It was gorgeous. Because the weather was the same all year long, we were outside all the time. We didn't have any air conditioning, but we didn't need it.
Yeah.
We ate mostly American foods, but we did have issues because a lot of the American foods weren't brought there. So when my dad would come back to the States every couple of months for business, he would bring back peanut butter and macaroni and cheese and Hershey's chocolate for my mom and some of those American kinds of foods.
Yeah.
At lunch, the school I went to didn't have a cafeteria. So everybody had to pack all the time.
Wow, I would forget.
Oh, no, because you do it every single day. It became routine. You pack your bag, you pack your lunch. It was just routine. That's what you did. We did have a maid while we were there. The first maid we have didn't do much cooking for us. The second maid did more cooking for us, and she was Colombian, so we got to eat some more natural Venezuelan and Colombian foods, which was interesting. Not just cheeseburger pie and tacos and lasagna.
Cheeseburger pie, what's that?
Oh, it's meat and cheese with Bisquick dumped over the top, so it all bakes like
That
kind of
just
like a
sounds really
quiche.
good. I'm so hungry.
It is. It's really good.
So what do you miss about it?
Well, there are a couple of parts. Several parts. I miss being part of such a close-knit community. As an American there, the Americans really took care of their own. We knew most of the Americans in the city. I went to an American school, and there were tons of Americans. My dad worked with lots of Americans. So we had a really close-knit community. I guess it was our last Christmas in Venezuela. We actually didn't have anybody come from the United States to be with us.
Mm-hmm.
So we had our Venezuelan family, which was all of the Americans who didn't go home for Christmas.
Yeah.
We ended up with like 50 some odd people for dinner. And it was exactly who we would want to be with, because that's who we spent all of our time with.
Mm-hmm.
At school, I met lots of other people who weren't American, and I miss that.
Yeah.
I've reconnected with some of them on Facebook. You know, my best friend when I was in middle school, my best friend from 9th grade, he and I have reconnected, high school boyfriend, or,
Yeah.
9th grade boyfriend, that kind of thing. So I miss the international connection and getting to see the different cultures. That's a big thing, because here in the US it's so isolated that you don't get to see other cultures. At one point before I moved, I had 6 really good friends, and all 6 of them were Asian. And so they had a goodbye party for me, and it was me and 6 Asian girls. And everybody kept looking at me funny because we were at the Asian Country Club, and there I am. I don't quite blend in very well.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I miss that. I learned all kinds of things about
Yeah.
different cultures and different foods and things like that.
Yeah. Why did you or your family leave America?
My dad got transferred. Procter & Gamble at the time, which is who my dad worked for, had the international headquarters here in Cincinnati, and he had worked in the international headquarters before, and they needed somebody to do to go to Venezuela to be one of the chemical engineer product development managers. And my dad hated his current job here, hated his boss, hated the situation.
Yeah.
So we went there, and shortly after that they moved the entire international headquarters down, which was beautiful, because they would only let us take 1,000 pounds worth of our stuff. 1,000 pounds is nothing. 10 suitcases.
Yeah.
How do you survive for 3 years with 10 suitcases?
I couldn't tell you.
You leave everything behind. And so we were ready to do that. And then luckily they moved the international headquarters down. And because it was all the vice presidents and all the bigwigs then, we got to take all of our stuff.
What experiences do you have in your journey? Did you experience?
I learned a lot about loneliness, because the first year I didn't know anybody, and that was really, really hard for me. At the same time, I really developed a close relationship with my parents, and especially my sisters, because it was the 3 of us, 3 sisters against everybody else. So we did a lot of taking care of them because they're younger. We went to the beach every month. It was an hour and a half. So we'd all pack up in the cars, and all the Americans would go on a big caravan, and we'd go up over the mountains and go to the beaches. It was fantastic. Let's see, what other adventures? The school I went to, because it was an American school, we connected with American schools all over South America. And at one point there was a Knowledge Bowl tournament in Brazil. I got to go to Brazil on a school trip.
That's amazing.
Here we go to the river.
Yeah.
And I went to Brazil. It was pretty amazing stuff. We got to do just tons of stuff. I was old enough and responsible enough that my parents let me do things that in hindsight they probably wouldn't have, now that they